Look, I think the software sell-off is one of the most disconnected trades I've ever seen relative. Like, in other words, like, look, no one knows when the Strait of Hormuz is opening, what the next step is in Iran. But you have to remember, like, the AI revolution is still happening. Look, I've covered tech since late 90s. If you sold during geopolitical freak-out periods, those are some of the worst times to sell. Look, the memory super cycle is not changing. Chips are the brains behind AI. And I look at Terafab as sort of the first step in what's going to be a Tesla-SpaceX merger.
With geopolitical tensions in the Middle East rattling the tech sector, many investors are asking one big question. Should I still be investing in AI and technology? Is the massive capital we've seen flowing into tech starting to dry up, or is this just a temporary setback? Today, we sit down with Dan Ives, Global Head of Technology Research at Wedbush Securities, to find out why he believes this is actually the most critical time to stay in the game. Dan is going to give us the names he thinks are great value here, and if we go lower, we'll cover everything from the upcoming SpaceX IPO and how it relates to the massive potential of Tesla's Terafab project. Is it time to pull back, or is this time to invest? The answers are right here. Let's dive right in. Dan, welcome again to the show. It's great to have you here to give us some guidance in these really volatile markets. I guess first question, this overall market sell-off, we maybe got a little bit of a break from it today, but not hugely. Does it offer special value for certain sectors in AI? Like what sectors, could we take advantage of, investors take advantage of with this downturn?
Look, it's a white knuckle environment. I mean, similar as COVID, Liberation Day. I mean, that's sort of what we're going through. I mean, look, I think the area that's probably the most disconnected continues to be cybersecurity. That's an area that these stocks are trading like they're really going to be disintermediated by AI, Anthropic, and others. I look at names like CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, Zscaler. Look, I think the software sell-off is one of the most disconnected trades I've ever seen relative to Microsoft, Oracle, and some of the other names.
Yeah, it's hard for any of us to figure out where oil is going or when exactly this conflict is going to end. But should people be holding dry powder to see, another couple of weeks, or should they be going in, say, if I want to put in X amount of dollars, put in a quarter now or a quarter later? Is this the right time to start sort of stepping in?
Yeah, I think that latter part is more how you do it. Like, in other words, like, look, no one knows when the Strait of Hormuz is opening, what the next step is in Iran. But you have to remember, like, the AI revolution is still happening. The $4 trillion that's going to be spent is still going to be spent in terms of CapEx. I think you look at the quality, specifically large cap names that are way sold out. From Nvidia to Microsoft, I believe Tesla is another one. And you pick at these names as the sell-off continues. Look, I've covered tech since late 90s. If you sold during geopolitical freak-out periods, those are some of the worst times to sell.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, last year, Tariff Liberation Day, I think Nvidia got below 90 for about a nanosecond, and it's very, very hard to pick the bottom. So I think that it's a good idea to start legging in and saying, you know what, I'm going to get some value here, and this too shall pass. Do you like IGV? Do you think that's a good ETF to be looking at? I mean, or more single names?
Yeah, I don't love the IGV. I mean, just it's a barometer, but just giving some of the names. To me, it's really more like you want to own some chip names, in these sell-offs, Nvidia, AMD, and others. On software, I would rather be owning Microsoft, Salesforce, ServiceNow. I look at cybersecurity, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, these guys. There are ones in particular that really stick out. I do think it's more the individual names in terms of the winners. Given some of these valuations, look, a lot of these stocks are trading, like numbers are coming down 10, 15%. So it just speaks to what I believe is baked into a lot of these stocks.
For our investors who are, interested in SK Hynix and Samsung and Micron to an extent. They really like that as well. You've said before that the SK and Samsung and names like these have entered like a memory super cycle. So basically, we should probably look at this decline as just sort of short-term volatility, and in maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, that the valuations will come back to where they should be.
Look, the memory super cycle is not changing. I mean, there's something you could argue the shortage maybe, just increases. The SKs, the Microns, the Samsungs, that I believe, is really almost across the board on chips. This, I think as an investor, it's very easy to get caught up in narratives and scary sort of backdrops. The memory, the software, the use cases in AI, the CapEx build out, that's happening and to some extent accelerating. So it just goes to you have to be able, based on your risk profile, to navigate these environments. Because realistically, the biggest opportunities in my career were during moments like this.
So when we think of the most tariff liberation day, but some of the other moments for some of our viewers who might not remember like 5, 10 years back, what like some of the moments that you this makes you think about when you see this price action.
I mean, look, if I just go through I can go through American.com bubble, burst, financial crisis, the European debt crisis, right? I mean, where everyone thought Greece was tip of the spear. You go back to, what we saw in sort of 2018 in terms of, some of the macro sellouts, massive COVID, 2020, for Liberation Day, 2022, Fed inflation, where obviously stocks were down massively. I'm just saying, like, it's easy during these periods to basically just want to go to the sideline. But I do believe, given where we are in the fourth industrial revolution, you gotta be able to navigate.
Right. I want to shift gears a little bit, and I think Tesla apparently was filing its confidential memorandum to the SEC the other day, or there were reports that they were going to. Do you have thoughts on the timing of a possible SpaceX IPO? Are they going to sort of beat the Anthropics and the and the Open AIs to the gun, like be the first major IPO of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think summer is sort of the time frame that looks like there. For SpaceX, it'll be a watershed event, but it's also my view. It's another step. What ultimately will be a Tesla SpaceX merger, down the road. I think that's, to me, as a Tesla investor, you want to see these two companies get further and further intertwined. And look, you bring up SpaceX in the context of Anthropic and OpenAI, and it just shows that the appetite is there from an investor perspective. And I think SpaceX, it's a one of one, right? In terms of what they're doing, and especially when it comes to data, really what SpaceX is going to be driving on the Musk.
So would you say that if we get Tesla at lower valuations, and you think you might not be able to get into the SpaceX IPO, is it a good time to get some Tesla, because ultimately those two will move together? SpaceX does well, Tesla is going to move well. Is this sort of a proxy to get a little bit of SpaceX on board if you can't get the actual?
We've talked about that. I mean, I think that's an opportunity in terms of Tesla almost tangentially owning SpaceX through it. And also it's XAI. The XAI merger with SpaceX is extremely important as well. And really what Musk is creating is his own ecosystem. I mean, in terms of his own AI ecosystem between XAI, SpaceX, and Tesla.
I wanted to ask you a little, there's been a lot of buzz about this Terafab project that Musk wants to do that's allegedly ultimately going to give us 1 gigawatt of compute, which is just a massive number. But, what do you think? I mean, he's done his gigafactories. It's hard to doubt him. I mean, what do you think of Terafab? Is this really something that we could see, maybe in the latter part of this decade, that, this will actually be happening?
I believe it will. I mean, just go back, like when Apple said they're going to build their own chips and basically take Intel out, everyone thought that was a joke. I mean, what happened? I mean, chips are the brains behind AI. And I look at Terafab as sort of the first step in what's going to be a Tesla SpaceX merger.
Again, so many people have tried to short Elon and been carried out. If he comes through with Terafab, longer term, it's going to be 2, 3 years, maybe even more, before it really gets up and running. Do you think they're a credible threat to traditional foundries like the TSMCs of the world or Samsung, or be like a real competitor? Like, you're not sort of the only game in town now. I can do everything from design and manufacture. A vertically integrated, massive competitor.
It's about building an end-to-end platform, and that's essentially what they're doing. Look, are they competitive? TSMC, others, Nvidia, the co-opetition, yeah, but I think this just speaks more and more like Tesla is going to be like an end-to-end platform from chips to software to data, robotics, autonomous. I mean, this is sort of everything that's getting built out. I think it's easy to get caught up in the environment and the backdrop, but you got to kind of see forest to the trees in terms of what they're ultimately doing.
Now, in terms of, is there anybody else thinking about something like that? I mean, this could potentially be a big change, openly, and for the Korea names, 5 or 10 years from now. Is anybody else thinking about this, or is this really something only Elon can probably do?
I do think it's unique. Look, I think every big player in their own way is trying to figure out how they can get bigger. If it's through acquisition, if it's through product development, if it's partnerships, in this fourth industrial revolution. I think that's how everyone's thinking. Now it comes down to who's going to be successful and who's going to be successful at time to market. Because I think the windows are going to be the key as this all plays out.
We had a sort of a big downdraft in the Kospi early, and then it bounced and stabilized pretty nicely. Seems to be, do you see value in Samsung and SK right now, or do we wait for a little bit more of a dip if this conflict goes on a little bit longer? How should we be thinking about that?
Look, I mean, obviously Kospi had an historical run to start the year. You've seen a massive risk off, not just Kospi, but globally, NASDAQ, everywhere. Korea is going to be the centerpiece when you think about AI in terms of where they play with SK, but Samsung's doing. I think it's really, in my opinion, you have to play the software side we talked about, but you also have to play the chip side. That's going to be key, and I think Korea is front and center.
So, and if we get another downdraft, there'll probably good value, especially in the chip names in Korea.
Oh yeah, I think, look, the memory super cycle is not changing. I mean, the point is demand and supply. When you think about AI chips, 12-1 today. So I continue to think that, look, if your time rises a month, 6 months, okay, it's a risk-off environment. If you have a view, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, these are going to be the opportunities and the winners.
Makes sense. Makes sense. With sort of the higher gas prices and the higher diesel prices, and the view that it may last for quite some time, even after we get, hopefully, this thing settled sooner rather than later and in a good way. There's been a lot, some pushback, I think, in sort of middle of the country, places where they've been trying to put up data centers because of concerns about how much it's going to raise power. Is power something that the market is sort of overlooking? Like, can we power all these data centers if they don't have their own power? And I don't know, I doubt solar will be able to do it. Can we really power all these things? And are we able to put up small nuclear reactors to be able to power them? Is that something that the market is overlooking? How are we going to power these things?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's more data centers on the construction and active data centers. That's going to be a huge push, as you look going forward. And when it comes to nat gas, utilities, nuclear, solar, pipeline companies, I mean, it speaks to energy is going to be one of the second, third derivatives of AI. Look, I get some of the pushback, but it would be like, when you think about AI, the engine is going to be the data center. You need these data centers built, and I also think it's going to create more jobs, and it's going to take away. in terms of the technology because the innovation has happened in the United States. So I just think it's a seminal time. There's a lot of variables going on, but I believe this is really creating, it's year three of an 10-year AI revolution. It's being built.
I think it's sort of easier to forget that if you don't step back and say, where are we in the in the baseball game? We're like if we're in the third or fourth inning, you're playing very differently than if you think you're in the seventh and the eighth. We always hear data.
Well, and also at that point, like if you're playing baseball and it's third inning and your team's down by 2 runs, you say the game's over. No, I'm just saying. I mean, that's kind of like what's happening with the market now.
Excellent. Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Questions. It's such an important time, and it's always great to be here with you.
Looking forward to seeing you again.